Hey YouTube. Okay, so this is a really interesting style of Italian polyphonic singing that has been severely underdocumented, if at all, in the English speaking world. And so I wanted to introduce this really unique style of singing to all of you. So I discovered this style of singing about a month or two ago. And what it is Sardinian polyphonic singing. So Sardinia is if you can think of almost like a state as it were in Italy. um, you know there are the other states include Basilicata, Campania, Calabria, um, Emilia Romagna, um, Molise, Lazio, um, other places like that. So just like the general kind of broadest divisions of the areas in Italy. So Sardinia is one of those, and it's home to one of the coolest instruments, which is the ancestor of the bagpipe, called the triple pipe. But I won't go there in this one. Instead, I'm covering a unique style of polyphonic singing. So this is a style of singing that uses four parts, one person of each part. And the voices are actually named after, there's a very strong pastoral connection in Italy. So, you can imagine, a shepherd and his animals, whether that be sheep or cattle or whatever it is, taking care of them. So, the first voice, and probably the most obvious voice that everyone will kind of understand, is the shepherd voice. And the shepherd voice is the only voice in this group of singers that actually sings words, okay? And these words can include, Sardinian. It's always in Sardinian, and it's never in basic Italian. So that kind of complicates things, because a lot of people in Italy are just learning basic Italian and not really learning any dialect. So it's kind of a dying tradition that I hope doesn't absolutely die. Anyway, so the shepherd is the only voice that sings words, and it's often pieces of poetry, or even just ballads, or whether that, or maybe like just even just pieces of just text about daily life or social issues, political issues, unemployment, things of that nature. Maybe even some pastoral texts. And they always sing it. It doesn't really matter what key they sing it in, but they do stick to a certain range within a key. And so, because we often use movable solfege, the do, re, mi system, it's easier to spell it out in solfege, because every group has their own key that they sing it in. So the shepherd voice sings the words usually from the do to the so, which is the tonic, up to the dominant. So they've got a fifth range. Now they don't just sing words though in Sardinian. They have a really ornamented style of singing. So they have trills and gracenotes, and it's a very stylized style of way of singing. So that's the shepherd voice. The three other voices sing nonsense syllables to accompany the shepherd. The first voice I'd like to cover of these is the goat voice. Now it's called the goat voice because it's highest in pitch compared to the three voices, the three backup voices. Like the shepherd, the goat voice sings in their regular kind of normal way of singing. And both have a very nasally kind of quality to the voice. So, for example, the shepherd sings a word, It has a very ornamented. You can hear it kind of has a very ornamented style of singing. I don't know. Obviously, I don't know any Sardinians, so I can only kind of do it using nonsense syllables. Something like that, right? And it has a very nasally. They have a very nasally kind of quality of their voice, and it's hard to do that with nonsense syllables. Anyway, so the goat is one of the three backup voices, and they often hang around the mi, which is the major third of the piece of music. They can, in principle, go higher, up to the higher do, so in effect they would be higher than the shepherd voice. So they often hang around the mi, but they sometimes hit the so above. And a typical kind of rhythm, group of syllables that you would hear them sing would be something like bam, bim, bam, boom, or something like that. Bam, bim, bam, boom. Bam, bim, bam, boom, or something like that. And so when I was singing earlier, the shepherd voice, so the goat voice in this case would be ba be bam bom, ba bim bam bam bom, bam 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 bam, bim bam darom, something like that. Maybe something like bam bim bam bom, bam bim bam bam bom, something like that. And a commonality between the goat and the other two voices I'm going to discuss is that at the end of each phrase that they sing, usually they all descend downwards, kind of like a really big machine turning off. You know how big machines, when they turn off, they're running, right? Like that, right? Well, the goat and the other two animal voices do that. So they would, bam bim bam 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 bim bam 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 bim bam bam bam. So that's the goat voice. The next voice, I'm going to have to shift keys here because it's very low pitched. The next voice is the sheep voice, because a sheep is usually lower pitched than a goat. Now, in terms of solfege, movable solfege, the sheep sings on the so of the piece of music, which is below the shepherd and the goat. So if we're in the key of G, for example, the shepherd being, and the goat being, bam bim bam bam boom, bam bim bam bam boom, something like that. The sheep would be bam bim bam bam boom, bam bim bam bam boom, bam bim bam 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 bim bam bam, something like that. Now, unlike the goat and the shepherd, the sheep voice sings with a style of throat singing that makes your voice kind of harsher, if you will. So if anybody has ever talked about overtone singing, they probably have mentioned that you start by doing like a bubbly kind of, right, like a vocal fry, but then you push your diaphragm enough so that it ends up as something like I can't do it, unfortunately, but it's kind of like where the voice sings really. It's kind of, it's very hard to describe, because I can't do it, but it's where the voice is a much harsher kind of quality that's very rich in overtones. And then the last voice in the series is the cow voice. Now the cow voice is very unique because the cow uses a different style of throat singing that unfortunately I can't do either. This is a style of throat singing where, so if anybody has mentioned Tibetan monks, right? where they actually can sing a note an octave lower than their normal range, right? Well, what happens is they're vibrating their vestibular folds to make that happen. Now, I can't do that. I mean, I could try my best, let me see. Bam, bim. Well, I'm doing a sheep now. Bam, bim, bam, bum. Something like that. Well, I can't do it. But unfortunately, the only way to comprehend it is by listening to recordings, which I will put in the description. Hang on. Okay, so I actually do have a recording of 3 singers that are demonstrating their own unique voices, so I don't really have to do it. So I mentioned the goat voice, right? This is what the goat voice would sound like. And they're using the key of F sharp. Maybe F. Sometimes F sharp or F. See how they're using their normal voice, right? And now here is what the sheep voice sounds like. Notice their voice is much harsher because they're using that Tuvan throat singing style. Yep, so that is the sheep voice right there. And finally we have the cow voice. And I didn't mention this yet, but the sheep hangs on the so note of the piece, right? The cow hangs on the do note of the piece. And I mentioned that they're doing the vestibular fold type of throat singing, right? So it will give the illusion that they're singing the do a fifth below the sheep, right? So if the sheep would go bam bim bam bam boom, the cow would then be bam bim bam bam boom, bam bim bam bam boom, right? Well, no, that's actually not what they're doing. They are technically singing bam bim bam bam boom, bam bim bam bam boom, but because they're vibrating their vestibular folds, and they always vibrate 1 octave lower, it gives the illusion of bam bim bam bam boom. So they're actually not singing that low note. They're generating it by using their vestibular folds to make that low note. So technically, they are singing, if you didn't take throat singing into account, they're singing a second inversion chord with the sheep on the 5th of the scale, the so, the cow technically singing the do, so a 4th above the sheep, and the goat on the 3rd, so the mi of the chord. But because the cow voice is using the vestibular folds, it gives the impression of a 4-note chord. So you have a bottom do, which is one of the 2 harmonically generated voices by the cow. You have the sol a 5th above, which is the sheep. The do a 4th above that, which is the actual pitch that the cow is singing. And then you have the mi a 3rd above that. So you have 3 voices but are producing bam bim bam bam boom for the cow, bam bim bam bam boom for the sheep, bam bim bam bam boom for the cow again, and bam bim bam bam boom for the goat. So here's what the actual cow singing sounds like. An actual Sardinian singer will demonstrate it here. Bim bam bim bam boom, bim bam 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 boom, bim bam bim bam bam boom. So you'll notice that there are 2 notes sung at the same time, 1 octave apart. Do you notice that? Bim bam bim bam boom, bim bam 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 boom, bim bam bim bam bam boom. Yeah, so the sheep and the cow are the 2 things that make this Sardinian style of singing a very unique style. So, this example also includes an example of what the shepherd would sing. I don't know if these are, I don't know what this is because, again, obviously I don't speak Sardinian, let alone basic Italian. But here's what the shepherd voice would sound like.
Divinas armonias en liuton, divinas armonias en liuton, derirar fiorinos en mandolan, divinas a.
So you notice that they have a lot of ornamentation and trills and gracenotes in their voices, right? In that style of singing, right? So that's the shepherd voice. Okay, I'll let you hear it again, the shepherd voice.
Divinas armonias.
And obviously they're all singing different words depending on what piece they're singing. So this is just one example, okay?
Divinas armonias en liuton, divinas armonias en liuton, derirar fiorinos en mandolan, divinas a.
Now we're going to have examples of two of these singing styles together, and they might, and there are a couple, they're going to be, the other voices are going to join in. So I'll describe it to you as we hear it. So that's the shepherd. The cow just joined him. So that's the cow. And that's the sheep. That's the sheep by himself. And then the goat by himself. So that's the shepherd. So the cow and the shepherd are singing together. Now the sheep joins in. See, the shepherd is still singing words. Can you hear that? Oh, I went back too far. So you hear the shepherd singing the words, but you hear the other two voices doing their rhythmic syllables, right? Now the goat is going to join in to be the full quartet. And one thing I forgot to mention that I just was reminded of this, they like to switch keys at random times, so you have to be very, 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 just like the animals have to be very, very, very attentive to the shepherd, well, these voices have to be very, very, very attentive to the actual, like, shepherd singing voice. Because if the shepherd changes key, they're going to have to follow him. Right? So if the shepherd changes key, the animals are going to have to, so it, the concept of the shepherd, is underlined just within the music here. So you notice the shepherd changed key, right? Right? And they all changed key. Oh, there we go. The shepherd actually went up to the sol this time. See, there you hear the descent in pitch, which is another unique trait about this style of singing. Dam bim bam bam boom. See, they changed key again. You have to follow the shepherd. And this do, mi, sol chord is a very common chord that a zamponia plays. And this is in the octave of a sei palmi, or number 6 zamponia, which I'm going to explain at a later date. But to me, that sounds like a bass style zamponia in a vocoder, don't you think? And then you obviously have the shepherd singing with it. Okay, they change key again. Listening to the shepherd is key. Haha. Pun intended. Yep. So that is the Sardinian throat singing explained as detailed as I could, especially of a very underdocumented singing style that barely anybody in English knows about. I learned all of this by using Google Translator, and this is actually how I learned about how zampoña works and the different makers. And I'm in the process of writing a big article about the zampoña because the Wikipedia article in English is absolutely way too vague because nobody knows enough about these instruments. So just like I know a whole lot about the zampoña, I know a lot about this Sardinian style of singing. So I'm privileged to share it with you. So if you like this, feel free to give it a like, subscribe, comment away. I'm going to put examples of this style of music in the description so that you can hear it for yourself on the speakers or headphones that you have, so that you would get the full perspective and so that you can see what they look like. I've been told that this is a style of kind of like Italian barbershop singing, and it's often sung in bars, and so that's partly what makes this music so fun, is because you're often surrounded by crowds, and it has the barbershop influence because they're tuned to match harmonics of each other rather than an equal tempered scale like a piano is. And so if you have a bass note, the cow would produce the second and fourth harmonic, the sheep would produce the third harmonic, and the goat would produce the fifth harmonic, because the second harmonic is this note in the lowest G on the piano. The third harmonic is this note, the fourth harmonic, and the fifth harmonic. And so that's essentially how it works. So I'm very honored to share this very obscure style of singing, and hopefully you've learned about a really unique style of singing that barely anybody knows about. So go ahead and impress your friends.